What if everything you thought you knew about where a people came from was incomplete, and the real answer had been locked inside their own bodies the entire time? For centuries, the origins of the Ashkenazi Jews have been one of history's most debated mysteries. Historians have argued over it, politicians have twisted it, families have whispered about it for generations. But now scientists have cracked open a biological record sealed for thousands of years. And what they found doesn't just answer the question, it rewrites the story entirely. Here's what makes this discovery so powerful. The answer doesn't start in Europe. It doesn't even start in the Middle Ages. To find the real source, you have to go back more than 3,000 years to the ancient Levant, the region we now call the Middle East, including modern-day Israel. You think of your DNA as a massive library, where every gene is a book about your ancestors. When scientists read those books in Ashkenazi Jews, they find a deep, ancient connection, not just to each other, but to Jewish communities across the entire world, Sephardi Jews from Spain, Mizrahi Jews from North Africa. Study after study shows the same result, and what that result reveals changes everything. These global Jewish communities, separated by oceans and centuries, are genetically closer to each other and to other Levantine populations like Palestinians and Druze than they are to the non-Jewish neighbors they lived alongside for generations. That is not a vague resemblance. It is a concrete signature written into their autosomal DNA, the DNA you inherit from every single ancestral line. This evidence strongly supports one conclusion. Jewish communities worldwide share a common Middle Eastern ancestry, all rooted in the ancient land of Israel. So if their origins are in the Middle East, what pushed them into Europe? The answer involves one of the most catastrophic moments in all of Jewish history. In the year 70 CE, the Roman army crushed a Jewish revolt, destroyed the Second Temple in Jerusalem, and shattered the Jewish state. This was not just a political defeat. It triggered a diaspora, a scattering of people that would permanently reshape the fate of an entire population. It wasn't a single mass expulsion. It was a slow, painful dispersal across the vast Roman Empire. These people carried their culture, their faith, and their Levantine genetic profile with them wherever they went. That dispersion set the stage for distinct Jewish communities to form all across the globe, including the one that would eventually become known as the Ashkenazi. But their path into Europe came with a controversy that almost buried the truth. By the 10th century, Jewish communities had begun to take root and grow in the Rhineland Valley of Germany. This is the recognized historical birthplace of the Ashkenazi. But for a long time, a provocative and deeply political theory overshadowed their true origins. It was called the Khazar hypothesis. The claim was bold. Ashkenazi Jews were not descended from ancient Israelites at all. Instead, they supposedly descended from the Khazars, a Turkic empire whose elite allegedly converted to Judaism in the Middle Ages. This idea was pushed hard, shows often with clear political motives, specifically to cut the connection between Ashkenazi Jews and the land of Israel. But then science stepped in, and what it found stopped that theory cold. Scientists examined the Y-chromosome, the piece of DNA passed directly from father to son. At first, one common paternal marker in Ashkenazi men, called R1A, appeared all over Eastern Europe. That seemed to support the Khazar theory. But when researchers zoomed in for a high-resolution analysis, they found a crucial detail hiding in plain sight. The specific R1, a branch carried by Ashkenazi Levite men, is a distinctly Near Eastern variant, one that originated there 1,500 to 2,500 years ago. And it is strikingly absent in populations from the former Khazar regions. Saying the paternal story written in their DNA points straight back to the Middle East, not the Caucasus. But that is only half the story. The maternal side introduces a twist no one expected. When Jewish men from the Levant migrated into Europe, they didn't live in complete isolation. Genetic analysis clearly shows they mixed with local European populations, primarily in southern Europe. Early studies of mitochondrial DNA, the DNA passed through the maternal line, suggested a large percentage of Ashkenazi maternal lineages were of European origin. That painted a striking picture, Middle Eastern men mixing with European women. But the complete picture from autosomal DNA is more nuanced. A scientific consensus has since emerged, and the modern Ashkenazi gene pool sits at roughly a 50-50 or 60-40 split, with the larger portion being Middle Eastern. The European contribution is real, but it does not erase the foundational Levantine ancestry. And yet, this mixed ancestry still doesn't explain what makes the Ashkenazi genome so uniquely distinct. For that, you need to understand something called a bottleneck. Imagine a bottle filled with hundreds of different colored marbles, each one representing the genetic diversity of a large population. Now pour out just a tiny handful. That small group carries far less variety than the original. If those few marbles multiply into millions, all of them trace back to that limited sample. That is exactly what happened to Ashkenazi Jews somewhere between 600 and 800 years ago. When their population collapsed to a founding group of just around 350 people. Nearly 8 million Ashkenazi Jews alive today are descended from that tiny group. This was confirmed in 2022 through ancient DNA recovered from a 14th century Jewish cemetery in Erfurt, Germany. This event compressed their genetic diversity and amplified specific markers. But the most astonishing part of what it left behind, that comes next. The bottleneck gave rise to one of the most striking findings in genetic research, a story about 4 founding mothers. Early mitochondrial DNA studies showed that 4 major maternal lineages were extraordinarily common across the entire Ashkenazi population. 1/3 of individuals from the ancient Erfurt cemetery descended from a single maternal line. Just one. The 4-mother story became famous. But it is also a simplification. More recent analyses reveal the founding group was likely larger, closer to 150 Near Eastern maternal families. Because of the intensity of the bottleneck, a small number of those lineages became so widespread that they created the powerful illusion of only 4 founders. It is one of the most striking examples of how a tiny founding group can quietly shape the genetic destiny of an entire people for thousands of years. So, where did the Ashkenazi really come from? The answer is written in their DNA, and it is a story of survival across thousands of years. It begins with an ancestral population of Israelites in the ancient Levant. It continues through a 2,000-year diaspora set in motion by the Roman Empire, a journey that carried their Middle Eastern genetic heritage deep into Europe. Along the way, they mixed with local populations, creating an admixed ancestry that remained rooted in its Levantine origins. Then, a brutal medieval bottleneck compressed them into a distinct genetic people. The science directly refutes politically motivated claims that Ashkenazi Jews are simply European converts. Instead, it reveals a genetic thread stretching back to the Middle East, one that has survived empires, migrations, and near extinction, woven into the very fabric of a people.